Vietnam is one of the first countries to receive funding from the French Development Agency, AFD. The goal of the French funding agency in Vietnam is promoting sustainable development in order to preserve the environment and enhance social life, supporting socio-economic development program and completing the Millennium Development Objectives of Vietnam. Sharing Vietnam Today would like to review the achievements that Vietnam has gained through the results of development aid projects by AFD throughout 20 years of operation in Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sharing Vietnam on VTC10 NetViet. To celebrate 20 years of operating in Vietnam of AFD, we welcome the Director of AFD in Vietnam, Mr. Remy Genevieve, and he will share with us the journey of success of AFD. Thank you, Mr. Remy, for joining Sharing Vietnam today. So, in the past 20 years of operating in Vietnam, what are your comments on the activities of AFD in Vietnam?
My comment is that we, although we started operations in Vietnam in 1994, these commitments picked up very quickly, and we've built a sizable portfolio of operations since we've reached a 1.5 billion euros commitment, global commitment across that 20-year period. So this makes Vietnam one of our most important partners, the second one really, very close to Morocco, which is the first one.
What about some highlighted achievement of AFD projects implemented in Vietnam?
Certainly. We first started with operations mainly in agriculture and rural development, since this was what the Vietnamese government wanted us to do in the first years of operation in Vietnam. So we did a lot in rubber, tea and coffee plantations with a view to improving the livelihood of the poor people and smallholder farmers. Shortly after that, we also started working on urban development and the development of infrastructure, transportation, and potable water, and also infrastructure aiming at protecting the population from the flood risk. And more recently, we have put the stress on helping the Vietnamese government, to fight against the climate change.
How do you see the role of AFD in contributing into the sustainable development of Vietnam?
Everything we do has to comply with the sustainable development purposes. Being sustainable and financing sustainable program has been the core business of AFD ever since we were created, really, and certainly ever since we started operating in Vietnam. What is more typical of what we do in Vietnam is what we do as sustainable programs to prevent climate change or to adapt to climate change. What we do in urban development to protect against floods, to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions through projects aiming at improving energy efficiency, for instance, that kind of thing. This is the trademark of AFD.
Recently in Hanoi, AFD organized a press conference celebrating 20 years of operation in Vietnam. Vietnam is one of the leading partners of AFD with 76 projects. Accounted only in 2013, AFD has committed 125 million euro in Vietnam for projects in the field of microfinance, urban development, rural infrastructure, environment and climate change adaptation. AFD is the only development agencies provide loans directly, supporting the development of state enterprises without financial guarantees from the government of Vietnam. This form of funding without guarantee needed from the government is a lever to support enterprises to strengthen self-control while not increasing the foreign debt of the government. Along with the Asian Development Bank (ADB), AFD is supporting the Ministry of Planning and Investment in the efforts to develop public-private partnership. Finally, the agency is also an important partner of the government of Vietnam in the field of response to climate change through various projects such as flood protection, public transport infrastructure, as well as through providing active support for the discussion revolves around sectoral policies on this subject. So in the past years, how do you see the contributions and support of the local authorities of Vietnam towards AFD's project?
Most of the projects that we fund, almost all of them, are discussed with the government and require full support for the government for them to be undertaken. So the identification of the projects that are in our portfolio are all projects that have been discussed with the Vietnamese authorities way upstream of the funding decision.
And since the financial aid of AFD committed for Vietnam is so huge, as according to the report of AFD, what are the indicators that you use to assess on the effectiveness of the project that being implemented?
We have a set of indicators or impact indicators that we appraise at the beginning, at the appraisal of the project, and that we measure as the project is being undertaken, implemented, and after the completion of the project. We particularly target the carbon footprint, climate change indicators, and the greenhouse gases emissions that are avoided thanks to the undertaking of AFD projects. So those are impacts that we do measure. We also, of course, measure what can be measured in the projects that we finance. For instance, I could tell you that since AFD started its operation in Vietnam, our project have benefited to probably between 12 to 13 or 14 million people in the country.
Now the new focus in the year 2014, I believe, will be into the sustainable urban development and the support for the productive sector in environmental responsibility, as well as to tackle climate change. What are some activities that have been done in order to achieve these objectives?
These three pillars will certainly remain very important in the future strategy. But climate change is what we do to combat climate change. This is an overarching program that encompasses a lot in urban development and in improving the productive sector. When we finance a project such as the Metro Line number 3, it is both an infrastructure project targeting urban development purposes, and it is also a climate change project.
I believe that with the great numbers of projects being implemented in Vietnam, obviously there should be some of the difficulties that AFD have to overcome. Can you share with us some of the examples, as well as what are the solutions that AFD have acquired over that past years?
There are, of course, problems in the implementation of projects everywhere, not only in Vietnam but in all countries, and the problems vary according to the projects. There is one set of problems that we have to face in a number of infrastructure projects. I'm referring to the land acquisitions by the owner of the project. The owner of the projects, in most cases, has to be the owner of the land where the project is going to be implemented, and in a number of cases, particularly in almost all urban projects, there are people or households that are already owners of houses or shops that are built on the piece of land where the project is being implemented, that have to be paid to leave to leave the place where they live, and this is what usually takes a long time, and this is one major concern and one reason why some projects take a long time to implement.
And with Vietnam recently being the middle income countries, does it have any effect on the commitment of AFD in Vietnam? And lastly, also after 20 years, after the mark of 20 years, what will be the future for AFD in Vietnam?
I would say AFD clearly will stay in Vietnam. We operate in a number of middle-income countries. This is one reason why we stay in Vietnam and intend to stay in the long run in Vietnam. It's very hard for me to be certain, to be clear-cut about figures, numbers in the upcoming years. As you said, 2013 was a year of important commitments. We reached an all-time high. We may be slightly under that figure in 2014. This will depend on many things. We have to sign and implement what we have decided last year. This is still to be done, and we have to identify new projects for the upcoming years. This takes some time, so there may be dips and highs in our commitment curve over the years. But what I can tell you is that on average, our commitments should remain in the range of 120 million euro per year.
Thank you, Mr. Remy, so much for all of your sharing today. And that's the end of Sharing Vietnam today. Thank you so much for watching us. And any questions and recommendation, please email at sharingvietnam@vtc.vn. Thank you and see you again.